Welcome to Crunch Time, a program dedicated to helping you survive the crunch times in your life, whether they are caused by accidents, natural disasters, poverty, economic recession, depression, or all-out economic collapse, or whether they are caused by your realization that today's food supply is being contaminated by artificial fertilizers, pesticides, and genetically modified organisms, and over-processing of crops into what can hardly be called food. We want to help you through the crunch times in your future by teaching you what we have learned about organic gardening, food storage, and food preparation. We'll bring you into our kitchen and into our garden and share with you what we have learned, hopefully before your crunch times arrive. Now here is Chef Francois. Last week we were going to cut up a bunch of vegetables, and we ended up slicing some up to put on the dehydrator, and we're going to pick up today where we left off with the other vegetables that we had left after we did the dehydration. Welcome to Crunch Time, where Jesus is King and all our desires are to serve Him. So I may or may not cut this up. It depends on how many cups of rutabaga chunks I get. I want to have at least 3 cups for a pie. And here's my measuring cup. So, you want to cut these dice, I call them, into about somewhere between a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch in each direction. I usually make it about 3/8 of an inch. Now, rutabaga is harder to cut through than any other vegetable in the garden because it's very dense. You can even hear my finger as it slams up against it. So you want to be careful. It's not really safe to try to cut all the way across. When I was at the potluck dinner and I wanted to save the rest of the rutabaga, I just cut the bottom off. Yeah, I was very careful to hang on to it, cut around this way, and then keep cutting around until, you know, the center was the last thing I got cut. You don't want to try to cut all the way across and then have it slip and cut yourself. I'm going to try a different knife I have in the drawer over here. Bigger knife, and it's got more of a curve on it. I really like that fillet knife, but then when I didn't have it the other day at the potluck, I borrowed Ella's knife. Ella is the pastor's wife of our church, and she had one that was a little shorter than this, but it was curved. It was a little thicker, and it rocked. It had more of a curve to it, and it rocked easy, and it really, you know, use this motion of cutting. You're concentrating your cutting pressure on one spot at a time. You get down here where it's almost flat, it's spread out, but up here especially, I'm going to try doing 2. Yeah, as long as I'm using the rocking motion, it cuts pretty good. You'll notice on a lot of cooking shows they use that rocking motion to cut stuff, and that's probably why. To make the pressure reduce. Notice I'm still using the skin, even the purple part of the turnip. I'm going to end up with a cube of turnip when it's done. probably shut the cameras off for this part because it's going to take a while. Okay, I've cut up about 3 cups of dry cubes, but I've got just a little bit of rutabaga left over, so I'm definitely going to cut up the rest of them. And after they're cooked, actually we want 3 cups of puree, which will probably take about 4 cups of cubes. But also, after cooking, we could, I'm going to cut this top off as well. Even the rutabaga up inside this stem is good, but that part probably needs to be peeled. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut 1 square out of each slice of stem. And there's something I wanted to say. I had the camera shut off, and I don't remember what it was. Oh yeah. Notice I've got small cubes and big cubes. If you're cooking in survival mode, which means you don't have a lot of fuel, you're cooking on a little teeny wood stove or whatever, the smaller you dice your fruits and vegetables, the less cooking time it will take, because you got more surface area per unit volume of vegetable there. And in survival mode, certainly you don't want to waste fuel that you're very short on. So you want to cut them small. So if you want to be in survival mode by habit, by not wasting things, then it would be good to make your cubes small. Alright, when I get done with this, I'm going to cook that with some water. In fact, I'm going to turn the water on and let it get hot. Don't like wasting water, but don't like wasting the electricity to heat the water either. So I've got a gas hot water tank in the basement that takes a lot less energy to heat the water than a little bit of water that goes through that pipe. Warm it up before I fill up the pot is a big deal. So, I usually turn the pot on or the stove on before I start as well. Alright, so we're going to let that cook, and we'll come back after it's boiled for 10 minutes and we'll drain it. Okay, we are boiling the rutabagas. They're about as soft as boiled potatoes now. Need to boil just a little bit more. And while it's boiling some more, I will show you. We have cut up the rest of the squash into cubes about a 1/2 inch, or triangles about a 1/2 inch. And I actually took 4 thin slices off the whole round squash, and put them on the drying trays with the dehydrator. So we're going to see what that looks like when we go pull those out later. All right, I am boiling about 4 cups of rutabaga dice, and I'm not going to need all 4 of them to make a pie. So I'm going to drain them here in the colander. little bit because there's stuff that comes off the skin. Makes a little bit of a film. And I'm going to let those cool. Meanwhile, I'm going to put in the squash. And I've got a little bit less squash than I need to make a pie. Oops, don't need quite as much water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the pie out of the proper amount of rutabaga, and then I'm going to puree the leftover rutabaga with the squash all together to make my second pie. So while this is cooking and while this is cooling, I'll let it air out actually, let the chimney effect come up through and all the steam come away. I won't mess up my sign here. And while that's happening, I'll rinse this off a little bit, and then we'll work on the pie dough. Got a real simple pie dough recipe that we used in the class at the church, and you'll recognize it if you saw that video. I like using a big mixing bowl for this. Sugar there, flour here, measuring cup there. I'm going to need some salt. I'll use my sea salt. I've got enough left in there. And I'm also going to need some oil, not olive oil, cooking oil. And we're also going to need some milk. Alright, we start off with, for each pie, and I like to make my doughs separate for each pie so that they have time to, what I call glutenate, form gluten with the water. I need 1 cup. And 2 cups. Looks like by the time I do my second pie, I may have use a little bit of whole wheat flour I've got in the cupboard. Cup I'm going to need. This I can put back over here. Sea salt, about 1/2 teaspoon. And that's about it right there. Put that over there. Okay, we're boiling here, so I'm going to turn it down to medium. Mix the salt and the flour together, make sure the chunks are out of the flour. Of course, your hands got to be clean. Alright, then you're going to take 1/2 cup. Put my glasses on so I can see better. 1/2 cup of oil. Slightly more if you want. And some milk. Or if you're using evaporated milk for your pie, which we're going to be using later for filling, you could use 3 tablespoons. I use 4. You can use 3 or 4 tablespoons of milk. Alright, I had a fork here, right here. That's cooking just fine. So I'll take this and I'll put it right over my bowl in case I spill some. And I want to mix the milk with the oil. As I'm mixing, obviously some of it does spill. And once it's all put together so that it's fairly consistent, you pour it in there and immediately mix in the flour. Holding the cup over top of the bowl here so that we'll get all the drippings. Don't want to waste in survival mode, that's for sure. Alright, I'll show you what this looks like. We've got flour and starting to get some dough in here. You just mix it together. When it gets to about that consistency, it's time to get rid of the fork. So you can undo the fork. And then you can just squeeze it together like this. Ball to scrape around the outside of the bowl to get all the rest of the flour and nuggets of dough that are left. You got it all together. Make yourself a ball. If it doesn't feel wet, you probably don't quite have enough milk in there. I'm going to just splatter some water in there to give it just a little bit more water to glutenise that flour. Now, when you mix water and flour, like some of you may have done in grade school to make school glue, it takes a while for the water to soak into the flour and to form gluten. So, we take a ball, feels fairly moist on the outside, and I'm going to put my wax paper. I'm going to wrap this ball in the wax paper. And let it set on the counter. Later, we're going to spread it out on the wax paper and roll it out. Meanwhile, we can make another batch, and let me check these, see how tender they are yet. They're probably tender enough to puree. The skins are tender. I only have one calendar, actually I have two, but survival mode, I would only have one, so I've got to take my rutabagas and put them into the blender. Could have done that a little bit neater. Okay, for now I'm just going to put that on top of my thing there. And so I don't step on these pieces, I'm going to throw them into the sink. Alright, now I need my colander to drain my squash pieces. And of course I want to rinse it just as soon as I take it out. I don't like to see food take onto my dishes. Just in case I need it again, I'm going to put it over there. I don't think I'll need it. Alright, these will let cool. We want to drain as much water out as we can without taking it too bad because it's actually losing some of our pulp now. So we'll just let it set. We won't drain water through it. Now, normally I will save the water that I use to boil squash because that water makes a good juice. So all you gotta do is add some sweetener and you can make some good juice out of it. Alright. You can get out a couple pie plates. I have a couple glass ones that I like. Glass pie plates with handles on them. Alright, we have our pie dough. It's been glutenizing for 10-15 minutes. Now, push it out onto the this one is not wet enough. I really need to sprinkle some water on this and use my other bowl for now, or use my other batch that I just made. So if you get to a spot where your stuff's just too dry to work with, just add a little bit of water, break it all up like this. Just splash just a little bit of water on it. A little bit more, I guess. I dripped some in that time, so let's see how much that is. Yeah, this is getting better. Still could use a little more. Second batch I used just a little bit more than 2 cups of flour because that's all I had left. And I wanted to make sure I had plenty of liquid, so I used 4 tablespoons of milk and about 5/8 of a cup of oil. So we'll let that glucanize over there, and we'll use this one. Notice how much wetter this is. So we can push it out with our hands for a while, and then make sure the edges don't have cracks that are going to spread out when you put your rolling pin on it. This one's going to be real easy to spread out. I have my new rolling pin right here I just bought for my cooking class at church. First time I had ever used it was the day that I bought it. Got a little bit of sticking. This is a Teflon rolling pin, but it is sticking a little bit because of the moisture. I used to use, in survival mode, a glass. It's got to be in here. I use this glass right here as a rolling pin. Just rolling it like this. That was tough. Alright, I need to sprinkle a little bit of flour on there because it's a little bit wet and it's hard to roll because it's sticking. Well, I think my time will be alright. Pull that out from under it. Hey, I just discovered something. If you don't push so hard, it won't stick so much. If you don't push hard enough, you're not going to thin out the pie crust either. I really should put some flour on there. This is sticking to my rolling pin. So easy. Let's see if I've got any. Just a little bit of flour left on the bottom of my canister here. Just a little. That should help. Help some. Alright, once you get it rolled out so it's big enough to cover the plate that you're going to use, put my rolling pin over there. Here's the plate I'm using, and it does cover it. What I do, if I had my board underneath it still, which I can do like this, just turn the whole thing over onto the pie dish, move the cutting board, peel back this, and while I've got it, go ahead and put my other one into it so it'll glucanize. And then pick up the edges and let it fall into the dish. So I've got it fairly centered. And then you want to form your edges here. Wherever you've got excess, you want to kind of push it over to the top of the spots where you don't have excess. I've got a lot of excess here. And I'm going to put it over here. Now you can get fancy with your edges of your pie. I don't get fancy. I'm more of a survivalist and I care more about function rather than form. So I don't care as much about what it looks like, as long as it holds the pie filling in without spilling out. Okay, if you don't have enough around the edge, you can pull it up from the bottom as well. If it's not too dry for you. Okay, I'm going to set that off to the side. Work on the filling. Okay, we're going to use, since this is more rutabaga than we need, I'm going to take the evaporated milk. 1 can of evaporated milk will make 2 pies. A can is equivalent to 1 cup. So if you don't have evaporated milk, just use 1 cup of regular milk. Evaporated milk works a little better. This is a little bit more than half of it, so I'm going to pour in a little bit more than a half cup. I'm going to set that off to the side for the next time. Alright, we have to puree the rutabaga. Rutabagas are tougher. They're tougher than pumpkins, so if you get air bound in there, like I normally do, I try pulsing it. If it starts missing, another technique is take a rubber spatula. A big rubber one should be here somewhere. I'll use, no, there's one right there. Something that won't be chewed up too bad if you happen to hit the blades. Alright, I'm pretty much mashed up here. Notice that's going to be a lot thicker than the puree from a puree pumpkin can or from the squash. But we're going to pulse it and see if we can get it to circulate by itself here. Well, we're running out of time for this week's show, so we'll pick up on the rest of the pie makings on next week's show. In the last minute of our show, I'd like to tell you about the real reason for this show. Jesus Christ, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Without Jesus as my Savior, I would not be confident entering into these trying times that lay ahead. If Jesus is not your Lord and Savior, I suggest you send me an email at crunchtime@roadrunner.com. and ask me how you can join the God who loves you, His Son Jesus Christ, and His disciples in everlasting life. For now, I say to you, God bless and keep you and yours. I'll see you next week on Crunch Time with Chef Francois.